Welcome back, everyone. Today we are going to talk about adding a handle onto your form. So at this point, my piece is leather hard. Ideally, you would have done some of the carving and adding and whatever your texture is. Here's my cat, Greg, saying hi. But I'm just going to show you what you would do, even though I have not added those pieces on mine as well. So I mentioned in my last video with planning and designing that you would kind of figure out where things are going to go with your pencil and you draw them in. My seam here is still a little bit visible. I could still go back with my loop tool, shave away a little bit. I could use the sponge to smooth it in. But another nice thing you can do is purposely putting your handle in that spot. It's a way to kind of add something else if you still have some inconsistencies in that area. So when I'm making a handle, important things to pay attention to. Remember, I am making a handle that will be the tail at the back of my cat head. So a lot of times people will make their handles way too thin, like as thick as a pinky. The problem is it might look nice, but when you go to actually lift your form with that handle filled with liquid, it's not strong enough to support. So it's important that you think more so the thickness of your thumb is probably the thinnest that you want to go, especially for such a big form here. And if you take a look at where the handle attaches right here, you might notice it's getting a little bit bigger. The best way for me to explain that is think about our arms, right? They're thin, but then when they attach to our body, they're a lot thicker. This might be a little gross, but they do that so that there's a great attachment, so our arms don't fall off. It's making sure you have a lot of space to connect together. So as you're making your handle, to kind of keep that in mind, using one of these trimming wheels is really nice for this too. We have these in the classroom, and that's just a nice way you can kind of turn and work with your piece on multiple sides. But first I'm gonna make that handle. So I have my piece of clay. I wedged this already. So I'm gonna take some of it. And there are so many different ways to make a handle, right? I could take my slab, like we've done before, rolling, and I could cut out a handle, and then I could use that, manipulating it in the same way we made our tube form. But in my case, I want to make something that's a little curvier. So I am going to roll a coil. So I take my piece of clay, I'm starting by just kind of pinching it to make a longer, thinner, narrow piece. And then I'm going to set it down on the table and use my hand and just roll back and forth. So I'm doing this until I start to see the depth or the thickness that I want. If you notice in one area, like in the middle here, it got a little thinner, then I would just focus on rolling in another spot until I get to the depth that I want. Sometimes you might notice it's going da, 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 da. Sometimes that happens when you're rolling a coil, and the easiest way to fix it is if you look, it's thin this way, thick this way. So I would just take the thick side, hit it, basically turns it into a little bit of a square. And then from there, it's easier to go back and fix it. Now at this point, I'm not really sure if this is the length I want, if it's the thickness I want. So before manipulating it, I'm just gonna take some water, put it on my clay. This is very similar to what we did when we made the tube. It's just to add a little bit of extra moisture so the clay is more bendable. So now I can take my form, go to where I'm planning on attaching it, and start to play around with what it will look like. So in this case, I see it's way longer than I need, and my plan is to have a piece that comes back out like this. Okay, so I know that I need to do a little bit more, making this smaller, probably up here, a little bit thinner, but I like the thickness down here where it's gonna be attached. So I'm just gonna do a little more of that rolling. You can also cut pieces, because this is way too long, so I'm just gonna take my needle tool and I'm gonna cut some off. And I know at the end I want it to be a little bit like pinched, so I'm gonna kind of pinch it as well. All right, same thing before manipulating it anymore. I'm gonna add some water to it just to make it really malleable. It's okay if it doesn't look perfect. There's plenty of time to clean up edges after. All right, so now back at attaching it. When I'm focusing on the bottom piece, which I'm gonna start with first, we want a lot of surface contact. So here you see there's a little spot attached to the form right here. I want more. So since the clay is so soft, I can actually press it to kind of get it to form against the side of the piece. So all I'm doing is pinching just to get as much surface contact as possible. All right, now I feel like I've got a much better area. And I can go back and see if my length is what I want. This is still longer than I want, so I'm just gonna slice some off. You see there's a lot of planning involved in it. But it's worth it because you can do a lot once you've planned it out to kind of perfect it. All right, so to me, that's kind of what I'm going for. I know I need to change the end a little bit, but I have a nice big spot where it would touch up here. I have a nice big spot where it will touch down there. All right, now, before I let this dry, because right now it's way too soft to attach. We need to wait till it's leather hard. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn to where I'm attaching it, and I'm actually gonna set it on and look at it straight on to make sure it's straight. Your handle doesn't have to be straight, so if you wanted to, you could have it curve around the form if that makes more sense for you. But for mine, I think I'm gonna keep it pretty straight on. So let's say I'm gonna attach it in those two spots. While I have the piece, I'm just gonna hold it with one hand. I'm gonna use my needle tool and I'm gonna draw where I'm planning on attaching it. So it's like a little a landing pad. It's like a place so that you know that's where you're gonna slip and score, and that's where you can come back to it. So if you take a look, I've got one spot up here, one spot down there, very clear where I'm planning on slipping and scoring. And I've held my piece in the shape. I'm going to simply let it dry in that position until it's leather hard. Okay, when it's leather hard, then I can pick it up, slip and score, and attach just like any other piece that I would. The only difference is when I go to slip and score this, because it's a very important seam, I would slip, score, and then I would add our Band-Aid coil. So taking a little bit of fresh clay and smoothing it into the seam here so that I don't really see the seam. It's just an extra layer of protection. All right, so the main things are, it takes a little bit of planning to figure out where your handle will go, the size that you need. Remember, every time you manipulate it, you want to add some water so that it's nice and smooth and it doesn't get all cracked. Once you've figured out the shape you want to mark on your form where it will be attaching so that you know that, and then you have to wait until it's leather hard before attaching. Those are the basics with a handle. I look forward to seeing you for our next video.